Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for making the time and joining us today. Our conversation about transforming college and career success for Latino students. I wanted to start. My name is Deborah Santiago. I am the co-founder and CEO for Excelencia in Education, a nonprofit based in Washington, D.C., with a mission to accelerate Latino student success in higher education. And I will be the moderator for our panel and our session. And what I'd like to do is just give you a little bit of context so we have a sense of the conversation we're going to have with our colleagues who are going to be presenting and sharing some of their perspectives about action, collaboration, and how they see the current transformation and need to make sure our Latino students are college ready and college successful. So first, just a little bit of context to start us off. I want to share what we see as kind of our Latino lens in post-secondary education. And so a couple quick facts. So let's start with data. So the Latino population, we are 1 in 3 of those 0 to 5. We are 1 in 4 of students in K-12 education in the country. And we are 1 in 5 of those in post-secondary education today. And that's important because not only are we there, we are the pipeline. And paying attention to the youth and growth of our population and how that informs education policy and investment now and going forward is critically important, that we make sure that Latinos are included in the discussion, the action, and the collaboration that's making a difference for our efforts and those of our country. The second piece of data I wanted to share is one of enrollment. So we know of the college-age students today who are Latino, 21% are enrolled in college compared to 24%, almost 25% for white non-Hispanics. And there's a little bit of a gap there in enrollment given our representation, and that creates opportunities to understand college readiness and access and persistence to completion. The third of the 4 data points I quickly want to give us to kind of ground this discussion is thinking about degree attainment. And when we look at degree attainment, we know about 24% of Latino adults have an associate degree or higher, compared to 46% of white non-Hispanics in this country. So again, significant equity gap in attainment. And when we look at that, thinking about what opportunities we have to invest and to move forward will be part of this conversation, especially given the pandemic and the need to transform to better serve Latinos. The last set of data, and again, just to ground us, is one, taking a look at where we are with our completion. And not just degree attainment, but where we are with students who are currently enrolled. And we took a look at 2-year and 4-year students and found that there is an equity gap in graduation rates, 2-year and 4-year, 2% equity gap in current students at 2-year, and a 12% gap in Latino degree attainment for the current year, looking at baccalaureate degrees in 4-year institutions. All of those, in addition to looking at those that are no longer enrolled, are ways that we need to think about transforming college and career success overall. We know that this pandemic has disproportionately affected our community, and what can we do as educators, as community leaders, as those committed to cause to make sure we're making a difference. Hopefully that's a little bit of context to get our colleagues going as we think about what we can do. I'd like to introduce our colleagues and ask them to just give us a 1 minute to share a little bit of their perspective about what they are doing with their respective organizations and institutions as they reimagine what does transforming college and career readiness for Latino students, what does that look like? And from there, I'd like to just get us started into questions. So the purpose is to have a conversation, a dialogue between this august panel of folks who do this day in and day out, and how we, in a broader scope, need to be thinking about what we in turn can do to take action, collaborate. So I'll start with Marisa Guijaro, who is involved in college readiness. Marisa, would you mind just sharing a little bit about your perspective so we can learn a little bit more about you and your perspective?
Sure. Thank you, Deborah. So yes, I'm Marisa Guijaro. I'm currently president of the New York State Association for College Admission Counseling. I also have over 20 years as a high school counselor currently at Suffern High School, which is a diverse suburban high school in Suffern, New York. So New York State ACAC, we're really well poised now, I think, to tackle some of the issues around our Latino students, our other Black and Brown students, and in the midst of the pandemic. And we've had some engaging programming since we could last meet in person, which was February of 2020. And we also are very strong on the advocacy front for our students. So I'll leave it there, and with more to come with the discussion and questions. Thank you.
Very provocative. Thank you, Marisa. When you think about the kind of action of counselors and their critical role in college readiness, as well as the strategies going forward. I look forward to hearing more. Thank you. Second, we have Ricky Hurtado, who is involved as a community organization and their efforts. Ricky, would you share with us a little bit about your perspectives about transforming college and career success for Latino students?
Yeah, of course. Deborah, thanks so much for moderating this panel, and thanks to all the other panelists for being here with us today. I'm Ricky Hurtado, and I'm the co-founder and co-executive director of a nonprofit organization in North Carolina called LatinxEd. And our mission is really to expand pathways to educational opportunity for Latinx students and immigrant families across North Carolina, especially in our rural communities. And so something that we are trying to really push the envelope on is really reimagining how we think about cultural and social capital and how that actually influences college readiness and success. We're also trying to lift up the leadership and voices of Latino leaders across the state to make sure that we have a voice at the table when it comes to big decisions in the direction that North Carolina is heading. We are one of those so-called, new destinations, the New South, where we have been transformed by immigration. And so making sure that we're thinking through that critical equity lens is really important for our organization. I'm excited to dig into that further in this conversation.
That's great. Thank you, Ricky. Yeah. Interesting as you see the comparison and the differences of engagement and offer. Thank you. And then we've got Carolyn Espinal, who is involved in parental engagement and working in the K-12 arena, trying to support college readiness. Would you share with us a little bit about your perspective?
Greetings, everyone. And first and foremost, I want to thank the Hispanic Federation for putting this very informative event for our community. I am Carolyn Espinal, Deputy Assistant Commissioner for the Culture and Historic Commissions of New Jersey Department of Education. And my mission is to ensure that all of these important contributions for the, either the Amistad, which is the Afro-American, the Latino, the Italian, or the Holocaust Commission, all of their contributions in history can be integrated as part of our curriculum in New Jersey public schools. So that way we can help the students to build pride of themselves and at the same time diminish discrimination and also increase the amount of numbers that we have since we adopted the seal of biliteracy. It is important for everyone that is tuning in right now. If you happen to be a parent who speaks another language, make sure you teach your son or daughter the actually love for that language. Speaking more than one language is a virtue, and it makes you value for more than one person. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That's a great way to get us started. And very diverse, but all interesting as it relates to how we need to transform and think about career success for Latino students. Maybe if I could start with you, Marisa, and again, if our colleagues would like to jump in, we're trying to have a conversation, so I don't want to limit that, but I want to be respectful of our time and space. So Marisa, how, from your perspective, is college readiness changing now, given the health crisis, this pandemic, and what we already knew, the historical racial inequities and the structural challenges we face? How are you thinking about this in the work, and how does that change college readiness for you as counselors?
Yes. This has been certainly on my mind a lot as a school counselor, and I think certainly for our association. When we hear the word reimagine a lot, but I think the pandemic has given us an opportunity to reimagine college readiness. We are faced, right as somebody who's kind of in the trenches and on the ground as well, the digital divide is, a major issue among, many of our students, our Latino students, our Black and Brown students. And I think the hybrid or remote learning model is going to, unfortunately be a reality for a while. So we have to, try to combat that gap. And I think certain communities are better prepared than others to provide devices and, help students so that they can access their education. As a high school counselor, I do have to also say that the social emotional learning is an important part of college readiness, and we have to make sure that our students are safe, healthy, fed, and well in every sense of the word in order to even think about college. There are some positives. I think that, it's changed now with the pandemic, given that so many institutions, I think it's about 70 or over 70% of higher ed institutions are test optional for this current senior class. Yeah. Here's an opportunity where, a structure, this whole testing structure, standardized testing has been, an inequitable means to assess our students. There's now an opportunity, but I think that's also led to some confusion on the part of the students and the families. So they said, well, what do we do now? How am I going to be evaluated in the college process? So I think that they do need some extra hand holding and, that it's, and be an assurance that it's going to be a holistic process. And I know my colleagues and I were really just telling students, focus on what you can control right now. You can control your essay. I think for so many of our students, it's so important for them to tell their story and to value their story. So those are, some of kind of my immediate reactions.
I have a little bit more, and then I'll ask our colleagues from their perspective. But as a counselor, how do you keep up with all this information? I mean, I just imagine students not knowing it's in so many places. They're looking to you all and your colleagues and peers to help them understand. You're kind of that intermediary. How are you keeping up with all of this to be able to help the students?
Right. Well, personally, as a professional, I must say with my over 20 years in the profession, I've always been active in associations, and just as a knowledge base, also as just for the collegial atmosphere, and that I know that I can call or email, folks at colleges and say, hey, what's going on over there, or what are you guys doing this year? I mean, to be able to have that, I consider myself very fortunate. I know not all access professionals have that network. So certainly as president of the, New York State Association for College Admission Counseling, we're trying to share that. We'd love to expand our membership. We're hoping that we can even offer some membership grants, for folks within the state where the membership fee could be a challenge for them. So I think it's really important for people to have their network, because you can't do it all on your own. And it is a challenge to keep up with what's going on. And at the same time, if you're serving students and families every day.
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, it speaks to some of what we know is critical, which is we have to have our own network to help support the network that extends beyond and beyond. I imagine that some of what, Ricky, you've had to do at your organization, and you're in North Carolina, an emerging community, you're in rural areas and others. How are you trying to make sure you stay informed and helping to support kind of the areas of focus that you mentioned to us earlier?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think many of the things that were already pointed out are true in North Carolina as well, right? I would say we're probably a little earlier, a few decades earlier in the process in building that sort of social capital and the relationships between communities, between institutions, between leaders. But the more and more that we always talk about becoming a broker of trust in the community. And so with our families, with our schools, with our institutions. And so over the last 2 years, many colleagues have been coming to us to ask, how do we, do XYZ in partnership with the Latinx community? And so that's been really important for us on both sides. We have families asking us, is this college or university safe and a good fit for our students? And on the other end of it, we're having, college admissions counselors, other CBOs, universities asking us the same question. How do we make sure that we are perceived as a good fit for the students that you work with every day? And so I think that's where it really starts, because then we begin to, I don't want to say act as a clearinghouse, but certainly building that village that our students can turn to for support. Obviously, no institution, no organization can do it on its own, and we're still a small, growing organization. So it's been really important for us to build the capacity in the organization, in the local communities as well. For example, we work in several rural communities in North Carolina, and one about an hour south of UNC Chapel Hill where our offices are. And there we know that we can only provide advising or sort of be present in our communities, but so often in a given week. But we know that by training counselors, training educators, providing them with the education needed to be successful and having the cultural competency to really be able to navigate these conversations with students and families, our students are better off. And so we've been focusing not just on providing direct services to students, but also making sure that the institutions we work with every day are comfortable in many of the issues that we face. We really work at the intersection of Latinidad, immigration, and higher education. And so not just issues of cultural competency, but also issues of immigration, which gets really complicated really quickly for many of our families.
Ricky, I can't even imagine this idea of having institutions higher ed comfortable with the issues of Latinidad and others. So it's impressive if that's kind of the strategy that you're taking on. Do you have like a concrete strategy, something an institution is doing and that you are doing that speaks to that comfort or that ability to acknowledge and live in that space for serving Latino students?
Yeah, that's a really great question. I think I was referring to one of the trainings that we have offered at UNC Chapel Hill, for example.
Okay.
A concrete strategy. We've trained over 300 people, and it's in partnership with other departments and organizations on campus. It's called Undocu Carolina. It's not solely a LatinxEd strategy, but it's similar to the sort of safe zone trainings that many universities are familiar with in terms of signaling to LGBTQ students that we know the challenges that you're facing, and this is a safe opportunity for you to engage in dialogue. And so we've been providing faculty and staff with those sorts of trainings that allow them to have some of the language and understanding and history as to what so many of our students are facing. And so now many faculty and staff actually have those stickers on their doors that say, I've been trained by Undocu Carolina, and they know that they've had these conversations, they've engaged with colleagues, and they've become a part of our network as well. And so that's something that's actually worked really well on UNC's campus. And we were actually working on rolling it out into the community right when COVID hit in the K through 12 setting. We've sort of hit pause and are rethinking on what we do that, because so much of it is really about the community that we build around it and the trusted conversations and relationships that we build in a space as we talk about difficult topics. And so that's just one of many strategies that we're working on to make sure that not just people in the Latinx community, but our allies as well are comfortable in talking about some of these difficult subjects in a really difficult political climate in North Carolina.
Yeah. I want to get back to that, but I appreciate the focus on the trusted conversations and stuff overall. Kerlyn, you're working in K-12 and you're working in curriculum and others, as you mentioned there. What are you seeing from your perspective that K-12 is or can be doing to take action in making sure that in high school and others that Latino students are college ready, especially given this pandemic?
Well, let me begin by stressing out that each New Jersey school district actually set their own guidelines in regards to these special matters. Yeah. However, I managed to collect information from some of the school districts so that we all know which type of strategies they're using to help our community. And just to give you an example, for instance, Hoboken Public School District, what they have already done, they created and they began to host virtual college visit and immediate date decisions. Mm-hmm. In addition to that, they have actually they have put workshops for parents as to how to guide them with financial aid application, with common application, and actually to help them to see what college, to explore different colleges so that the students feel comfortable. This is just one of the examples. We also have another school district in North Plainfield. Basically, what they're doing as of now is they are holding at least one monthly session with the students In addition, they hold a monthly session with the parents as well. They try to provide information in both languages as possible. Most of the information is either printed or virtual information. And not only that, the counselors also meet with the student individually as well as with the parents individually, so that any questions that they may have regarding how to continue their education, they will be able to answer. But also for those students that are willing to join the workforce right after high school, they also have information and training programs that will help them not only to write a resume, to practice how to do well on a job interview, but also the jobs possibilities that are available within the state so that they can apply as well. We also have another example.
A question about that, because I want to make sure I understand this, and I want you to continue after you say that. But some of what was shared earlier is that the challenge here is technology for our community. And what I'm hearing, I just want to make sure I understand a little bit more. Is all of this being offered, Kerlyn, virtually?
Virtually, yes, both. Actually, we have an advantage as of now. One of the things that we're doing, as a matter of fact, New Jersey, we're taking pride. We're using 3 types of platforms, social platforms, such as Hooter, careercruising.com, and also the one that is New Jersey Career Assistant Navigator, which is the state-free online website, which helps the students, like I said, and the parents, not only how to actually explore colleges and universities, but also how to complete a financial aid form, explore scholarships auctions, and at the same time, help them to complete college applications.
That's powerful. Do you have any sense, and I know I'm pushing here because I'm such a data person, but do you have a sense of the kind of participation that you're getting? Because that sounds like a very powerful kind of holistic approach.
I don't have the specific number, but I do want to say that we take pride in the fact that we're making sure that our students, regardless of color, race, or ethnicity, are getting actually the preparation that is required for them to succeed. We understand that there will be the future leaders, and therefore we want to make sure they are on the right track.
That's powerful. Thank you. It's great to know that there are concrete things out there, because I think many of those in the audience are probably thinking about what are the action items that are concrete that you are doing, but then also that they might think about if they're struggling to make sure that in this era of trying to transform, given the pandemic, does that create opportunities for us that might not have been there before? How do we, what's that expression, never waste a crisis, that issues that might have seemed intractable, we can address now because the pandemic has put into question many things that were structurally limiting our students and opportunities. But it also means that there's a challenge of resources and time. So Marisa, you work with counselors, you're a representative, you work with them all the time. How is that being juggled at the high school level? And how are you partnering with your institutions of higher education that are trying to figure this out?
Yeah, we've sponsored, I know at my high school, a series of virtual college visits. And since we're on a hybrid model, sometimes the students are in school, so they have access to their school issued devices. On a larger scale, New York State ACAC actually ran a pilot virtual college fair in August, and we have 3 more planned for this fall, including one for transfers, and one of them is tomorrow. So people can go to the New York State ACAC website and spread that among your networks if you have interested students. But yeah, I mean, it is challenging, but I like your phrase about not wasting a crisis. Like I've been saying to the association, we have to find the opportunity in adversity. And I think what happens is that the pandemic is highlighting some of the differences, but it's also flattening some of the opportunities in some way. Like, for example, some of my students are able to access virtual fly-in visits and enrichment programs that they wouldn't have been able to do before when programs were in person because of cost and travel and time to get there. So there definitely are some opportunities, as long as they have the technology, though. And fortunately, I work in a space where most of our students do. I think we need to understand that a lot of students, even if they have a computer, they're using mobile devices for everything. So I would suggest to folks out there that are setting up whatever kind of platform, just make sure it's mobile friendly, because they love their cell phones and that's what they're using.
Yeah. I will say at the national level, we found at just this technology issue, but it is phones. So it's hard to do your homework there, or you've got students who are part of families sharing bandwidth if they do have internet at home that isn't their phone. And a quiet space to do that is a challenge. And sometimes people are not as comfortable in their backgrounds with where they are if they don't have they're in a closet or some of these challenges if they're able to access it all. But what we did also mention, Marisa, is one of persistence. And we are a community that's incredibly persistent despite the challenges that come up for us. If I could go back to you, Kerlyn, because again, I'm really appreciate what you guys are doing in K-12 and making sure you're paying attention. Are there partnership strategies that you have in place with your institutions of higher education that are complementing the kind of work you're trying to do with your district?
Well, New Jersey Department of Education makes sure that, actually partners with the schools that put an emphasis with technology and career support in order to continue with the ongoing effort to help not only secondary, post-secondary, but also businesses and industries to create college awareness in students. Yeah. And that's why, as I want to mention, I understand that during this pandemic era, many actually school districts around the nation face the issue with digital gap. I'm so happy to say that our governor makes sure that he in repeatedly occasions said that he had a compromise with us to make sure that, the students, educators, administrators, parents were actually ready to navigate these difficult challenges in a more easy way. So we have actually managed to break those gaps, and at the same time, we're working together. Like I said, we're doing things to make sure that we believe in equity, but not only we believe in equity, we want to make sure that once those opportunities that are available for our people, we want to make sure that they take advantage of it, because equity, yes, we're providing everyone an equal chance, but sometimes there are barriers that prevent our people from taking advantages of those equal opportunities. So we want to make sure that they know one of the things that we take pride at New Jersey Department of Education, and that is one of the reasons as to why in overall performance we have been actually named number one public institution in the nation by Education Week magazine, is because our forefront is equity. Not only with the students, but also when it comes to educators. And that is the reason as to why we even working with Grow You On, giving the students of colors the actually chance of opportunity to consider becoming a teacher if they don't know what major to continue in school. So that way they can continue to be part of this diversity so that we continue to grow all as a group.
That's powerful. Thank you. That's interesting. In that same vein, Ricky, you are working in North Carolina, as you shared. I was intrigued by your comment about the voice of Latino leaders, making sure that's included in the efforts and consideration. Can you talk about how your effort is trying to make sure that the voice of Latino leaders are included? Because we know often that leadership opportunity creates a power base. And part of this transformation of higher education means we've got to make sure that we are bringing in the kind of power base that's going to make the change we need. Any perspective that you're trying to build on from your efforts?
Yeah, I love that question, because that's something that is on top of mind right now and something we are eager to really get to work on in 2021 after the end of this year. I think part of it for us is understanding where conversations around local and state policy are in North Carolina. In to sort of give you some context, of the last about 2 years, we've essentially been making plans as a state on what the next 10 years of educational attainment efforts look like in North Carolina. We know we're going to have about 500,000 jobs that are left unfulfilled unless we deal with the education attainment gap. And so part of those strategies are understanding how we close the gap, this equity gap between Black students and Latino students in particular. The challenge at those tables, in those rooms, right, in those conferences, whenever you're making these decisions and learning about what the challenges are, is that there's been a lack of voices that are really culturally competent and understand the experiences and true structural barriers that so many of our students face. And part of it, right, is challenges around a comprehensive understanding on how immigration policy in the South have impacted our families. I'm bringing up immigration a lot because we do have the majority of our students that we work with are part of mixed status families. 93% of our students are U.S. citizens at this point in North Carolina that are in the K-12 system. The majority of our DACA students are in college or out in the workforce. We, because of the rescission of DACA, are no longer seeing DACA students in our high schools. But that doesn't mean that the challenges of immigration have really shifted much for our families. State policy here in North Carolina has complicated things for immigrant families. And I won't get into the weeds here, but essentially think of it as almost like a double FAFSA process in terms of the gatekeeping that happens, because you have to take the FAFSA and then you actually have to do another system called a residency determination system. And many of our U.S. citizen children are being classified as out of state. And so they are having to go through hoops and hoops that other students don't. And that's as far as I'll get to in the weeds there. But point being is that we are identifying Latino leaders at the grassroots level, leading community organizations like ours, because we know we touch 4 counties. We are in the center of the state, but there's a lot of really great efforts happening in Mecklenburg County and Charlotte to the west, near the coast to the east. And by identifying those leaders and bringing them to the table in spaces we've been invited to, we're hopeful that we can broker some dialogue and help them understand what are some of the challenges happening across the state that will enable us to really be able to think more holistically around what equity looks like for our community.
Great, Carolyn. Yes, please. Yes, jump in. Sure.
I do understand the importance of immigration. As my previous job, I am blessed to say I used to be Senator Menendez, Director of Immigration, and therefore I learned the importance of actually immigration when it comes to how important it is, how important factor it is in the life of our students. And that is the reason as to why I want to mention that in 2018, our Governor Phil Murphy signed a legislation that allows DACA students, those dreamer students, to actually receive financial aid to continue a college education. And that is something that I have heard and I have lived actually on daily basis as I was the Director of Immigration for Senator Menendez. Most of the people that used to contact that office was, I have a problem. My son or my daughter has excellent academic skills. However, we don't have money for actually to school. They don't qualify for financial aid. They don't qualify for a loan or a student loan. So, those are things that are very important. And I'm so happy that you're actually mentioning them, because we're discussing things that matters to our community. And we know that a lot of time we just focus on the number, that gap that exists. Oh yeah, this amount of students actually are staying behind. But we also have to explore the reasons as to why they're staying behind. It's not because sometimes they lack the motivation to pursue a higher education. Sometimes it's because they encounter these issues. But that is why it is so important that we're having events like this, where we also have actually policymakers and elected officials that are tuning in, so that they can see that our community is ready to move forward. We're only asking for a little help. And, with that help, and I'm pretty sure that after today's program, they're going to be even more aware of what we need, and they're going to give us the little push that we need in order for us to continue moving along, conquering the world.
Carolyn, appreciate that. I think the other part of this is, it's not that our community needs to change. It's that the colleges and career efforts, the institutions need to change. So that's the other part of this. This is not about changing us. It's about changing the structural inequities that have been in existence since before this was an issue. The pandemic has only made more public things we've already known. And that's the opportunity as we get into this transformation of college and career success. Let me ask you, Marisa, if there's one thing you would ask an institution of higher education that they're to do differently to better serve your Latino students, given what you know in high school and as a counselor, what would you ask colleges and universities to do differently to recruit and make sure that we retain the Latino students they have?
Yeah, no, thank you for that question. I actually talked about this recently at another forum among some stakeholders in New York State and beyond a few weeks ago. But I think we need to transform the myth of college that we have in our consciousness right now. Like, we have this idea that college it's either X or Y or Z. It's a very rigid model. We have this myth of the ideal is going away to a school with a campus and living in a dorm and then graduating in 4 years. And that's not really a realistic model for a lot of folks in the United States, Latinos and otherwise. And I think that the time is right now, especially with the pandemic, to turn that model upside down and around and reinvent it. Because I know, it's true. I agree that our students want an education and our families believe in education, but we have these structures that make it very difficult. So I would love to see if colleges could create, I don't know, some kind of, model where, okay, you can get an education, but this is a different pathway. And yeah, we understand, like, maybe, especially for like Ricky talking about undocumented students, a lot of them, if they have a job, they want to continue to work. They feel a responsibility and a desire to contribute to the family expenses. And, we have to be respectful of if that's part of your family culture or your priorities. We can't tell someone, oh, just throw that all out the window and embrace this sort of rugged Western individualism and leave your community. So I've seen students do it with, very skillfully, but it's difficult to balance sometimes, going, say, to community college part-time and working, and they're still supporting family, and they're kind of negotiating, this change in acquiring the social capital and the education while, maybe their family, has sacrificed everything for them over a lifetime. So it's so I think, it has to be sort of a cultural and structural shift that, our Latino students can embrace and have access. And then, of course, just more information available in Spanish. There's a number of organizations that do like National Hispanic college fairs. We've taken students to those fairs over the years. They often have Spanish-speaking professionals there, getting the word out. I saw some comments in the chat I haven't read, and I know we'll have time for Q&A later, but just how to work with undocumented students, which I've had from valedictorians, to students who, just had like less than a year in the States, go to college, and all different scenarios. So we always, we give the message that you can continue your education, and let's sit down and try to help you figure this out. But it may not be the pathway that, we see in the movies.
Yeah. Well, thank you. I think that goes back to what students can know about the pathways. And I appreciate the opportunity for institutions to think differently. At Excelencia, we're constantly pushing to show that you are intentionally serving Latino students, that it's not by default or by chance. And that means you've got to rethink some of what you're doing from outreach and engagement and retention and persistence. Because if the institutions are meeting students where they're at, they're student-ready colleges as opposed to waiting to look for college-ready students, that changes this paradigm and how we're thinking about better supporting our students. Thank you for that, Marisa. We haven't talked a lot about career success. So I wonder if Kerlyn, that in the work you all are doing in New Jersey, are you thinking about not just college readiness, but also career readiness and potential success?
Yes, that's what I mentioned before, that New Jersey actually, as of now, we're using this platform called New Jersey Career Assistant Navigator. That is actually a platform that has an extensive data regarding national, state, local workforce and projections. And like I said, this actually platform is free. And not only that, it helps not only the student counselors or the students, but also the parents to it's easy to navigate. And once they navigate it, they walk through not only with questions about, college, but also for those that want to join the workforce. And it helps them to be ready to become part of the, work arena.
Are you partnering with some of the employers and others to make sure that, our students are getting ready, but that they're ready to take them in and make sure that they're employed?
I'm pretty sure they do. As I don't want to speak about the school districts. I want to, emphasize once again that each school district has set their own guidelines, and we have given them sort of like a free wheel to do whatever they consider best. But I'm pretty sure that they are.
Okay, that's wonderful. Thank you for that, Carolyn. And my apologies. I appreciate you clarifying that. Because I do think that the career and college readiness, there's so much focus is on how we can better inform our communities in ways that they can take advantage of the systems. At the very time, the systems are changing because of the pandemic and because of the limited resources and opportunities that are out there. So in North Carolina and in the work you're doing, Ricky, how are you balancing this college and career readiness? And are you doing things differently? Or are you seeing higher ed do things differently because of this?
Yeah, no, that's on top of mind as well for us as we navigate the pandemic. In terms of career readiness, again, our organization has really identified its niche in sort of the landscape here in North Carolina, right? Which is sort of really emphasizing the power of relationships, right? So regardless of whether it's connecting students to mentors or connecting institutions to community organizations or really bridging the gap between mainstream initiatives and the Latino community, we've also been thinking about how employers get involved in our work, but in a way that is culturally competent and making sure that it is a learning experience for everyone, not just our students. And so we have some direct service programming with our middle school students that we work in a program called Somos Carolina, or We Are Carolina. And Lenovo is one of the employers that has come out to mentor our students and expose them to some of the work that they do on a day-to-day basis, right, through real-time learning, sort of project-based learning. That was about 2 years ago, right, when we had the chance to do that. Now, in the time of COVID-19, we had to really rethink what that looked like. And when partners like that are still willing to come out to the community and are asking, how can we help? We make sure we tap into that. And so we have been thinking of ways that we connect these virtual opportunities through a program that we have called, we relaunched our college access programming because of COVID-19. And so we relaunched a program called College y Consejos, which is a virtual college advising program that really focuses culture and comunidad. And so you can check it out at LatinxEd.org. And in that way, it's students finding, they trust our brand already. So tapping into a college advisor that allows them to connect with someone who understands their experiences and some of the challenges that they may already be going through as they navigate high school to college, but then also connecting with the types of employers that I've described to be able to have those sorts of interview workshops and things of that nature so they can gain those same skills even in a time of a pandemic. The battle that we're facing is the battle we've all described, right, which is the digital divide. And it seems like we've been able to get devices out to the community. School districts have done a good job. The challenge is more structural in nature, where we have to expand broadband into rural parts of North Carolina, where many of our students are having to drive to the parking lot of McDonald's in order to get, a decent Wi-Fi signal to do their homework. And so that is a challenge that existed before COVID. It's going to exist after COVID. And until we begin treating broadband like we do electricity and water, because we just need it now in the 21st century, our students are going to continue struggling with their digital learning.
I think thank you for that, Ricky. I think the additional part is that because we know this pandemic has disproportionately affected our community, because we're more likely to be either in service jobs or those that are more essential workers, that there's a disproportionate impact on us economically as well as educationally. And these are the parents of these young people. and we had the numbers earlier. What can we do on a bigger scale and scope to make sure that we are addressing the economic needs while we're coming up with really good strategies to address the educational needs of our students? Maybe I'll start with you, Kerlyn. Thoughts about what we can do, bigger picture, to address the economic needs that undergird these educational needs we have?
One of the things that we have to do is to actually focus on the bigger issue first, and they take things as a follow. I believe that parents should encourage their children to teach them the importance of time management, the importance of setting goals, short and long-term goals, and the importance of completion of assignment. I understand that we are experiencing challenges right now, but parents have to instruct and encourage their children and advise them that challenges only bring the best out of you, that this should not be something that should stop them from going forward. And therefore, even if they are taking classes remotely or they are, taking advantage of a hybrid mode, to remain all the time active in class participation, to participate in group classes, and to obviously develop good eating. Like she mentioned before, we understand that in order for us to do well academically, we need to have good nutrition. So develop good eating and actually sleeping patterns for the students. Sure. For the students, actually, this is what you need, but also the parents needs to make sure that they stay engaged as to what is happening in the school. And for those parents that are tuning in and have friends that say we don't speak the language, and that is the reason as to why I cannot participate, or I cannot be part, or I cannot be involved as to what is happening in the school, let me tell you something. Do not let the language barrier prevent you from being involved in what your children are doing and what is taking place in the school. I'm pretty sure that there is a parent that is there that is bilingual that you can actually become friend and try to find out. Also in the schools over here in New Jersey, we always have someone who actually speaks the language. So it is very important for you to stay connected to school, find out what is happening in the school. That way you can actually show your child that you care. It doesn't matter. I'm going to use myself as an example. My father did not speak English, but my father was always making sure that he knew what was taking place in the school and always asking me, despite the fact that probably by the time that he was asking me how I was doing, if I need any help, I have already exceeded the amount of school that he has completed in his life, but he was still being part of my life and actually showing that, here. So also create a place, a quiet place where your children can take classes and make sure they read every day.
Why don't we do some follow-up? I think that you have a powerful list. I don't know if that exists somewhere, Kerlyn, because I want to be sensitive. We've got a little bit of minute left, and I want to make sure this has been rich, and I know it only scratched the surface of the work each of the three of you are doing. And I see there are questions we haven't been able to get to in the area below, but if I could just ask one question, then we're going to wrap up, and I would give you all 30 seconds to give us your final thoughts on this. But one question, Marisa, if we can get to it quickly. As somebody who's asking, are the high schools seeing some activity that colleges and universities are doing now that they find most effective for college recruitment? Anything you're seeing in high school doing?
Something that's effective for college recruitment, I would say. I think, we have been encouraging students to have interviews if they can with college admissions reps, even if it's virtual. So I think, again, the student telling their story where they can have a personal connection, even if it's over the internet, I think is really important, especially for our community. Like they just need to have that connection. We can't shake hands, we can't hug, but if we can have at least a conversation. So I think that that's very important. And if they can see other Latinos that work at the colleges, that's very powerful.
So we saw mentoring, trust, and conversations. We've got lots of resources that are already in place at states that are making a difference, like New Jersey and what Carolyn was saying. It's a lot of work. Thank you all. Looks like our time is up here. I'm sorry we couldn't get to more questions, but thank you all so much for your time. Marisa, Ricky,
thank you.
Very kind. Thank you.
Deborah, thank you so much. This is Diana with Hispanic Federation. I thank you for the conversations. As you're saying, this is really just the beginning. We know that there is a lot happening. We're actually going to add like another minute to the conversation because there is a question that I feel like we need to address. And it's sort of like, where does the conversation of belonging happen in at the schools, not only in the trajectory of post-secondary readiness, but career development, and where can we institutionalize the belonging? Can we ensure that that there are policies in place that can ensure the students are going to feel a sense of belonging at the institutions that they're potentially attending, wanting to attend, but even if they're choosing careers, how do they foster that belongingness? And anybody can take this question. This is coming from Yvette Bello.
Well, I'll just jump in quickly. There are a lot of Hispanic serving institutions, and I think that they're, particularly skilled at, creating that there are communities for our students, and given that the Latino community is so diverse in itself, there's often, just like a lot of different niche places at those universities where if students are looking for the sense of community, it's there. And then I think there are aspirational Hispanic serving institutions that are not quite there yet, but they realize, and it also makes sense for them given the demographics to get on board.
Thank you.
And I think the other part is that the fit is about belonging. And I heard Carolyn say some of this, and I think that Ricky was also as well. Having somebody reach out and tell you belong, you're a part of this, we want to help you, your parents are a part, it's that sense. That's what I heard from each of them. I think fit comes from, the onus is on the institution or the organization to make sure that our community feels like they fit and belong. You institutionalize that by being intentional, reaching out, having the trusted information that our colleagues have shared.
Yeah. Thank you so much again. We are going to start engaging in these conversations. I definitely just, for this question, Stephanie Ramirez says, that diversity does not equal inclusion. And that is something to think about when we think about diversity and diversifying our communities. It is about inclusion and equity. Thank you so much. We are going to have our next sessions who are like breakout stage sessions. We do have representation from Florida, Connecticut, North Carolina, Puerto Rico, and Nueva York. Along with like an informational session for Jose Rivera Aller Scholarship. So thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
The program continues. Thank you so much to all the.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.